She actually looks ridiculous in that outfit.
What is she even doing here?
She stood frozen in the center of the room, her oversized maid uniform clinging to her body under the blinding lights. Laughter rippled through the hall, sharp, cruel, unforgettable. Someone pointed, someone mocked. Joy Adebamiro lowered her eyes as shame burned her face, every whispered insult cutting deeper than the last. Then suddenly, a thunderous roar shook the air outside. Glasses trembled, conversations died mid-sentence. From beyond the mansion walls came the unmistakable sound of a jet engine descending from the sky. Guests turned toward the windows confused, afraid. No one knew that within minutes everything they believed about that fat maid was about to collapse. Before we begin the full story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your country. And if you believe powerful stories change lives, don't forget to subscribe. Joy Adebamiro had learned over the years how to make herself small. Not physically, her body had never allowed that, but in every other way that mattered. She moved quietly, spoke only when spoken to, and kept her eyes lowered as if the ground deserved more respect than she did. In the Balogan household, that habit had become her shield. Silence, she believed, was safer than being seen. Her day began before sunrise. While the rest of the house slept under soft sheets and air-conditioned comfort, Joy was already awake, kneeling on the cold kitchen floor, scrubbing yesterday's stains until her fingers ached. The smell of detergent clung to her skin no matter how many times she washed her hands. By the time Mrs. Funke Balogan came downstairs in her silk robe, Joy had already cooked breakfast, cleaned the living room, and ironed clothes that cost more than she earned in a month. Joy Funke would call without looking at her. Yes, Majoy would answer instantly, heart-skipping in fear of being too slow. Funke Balogan never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her disappointment was sharp enough to cut without sound. A glance, a sigh, a curled lip when Joy passed by. Those gestures spoke clearly. You are lucky to be here. Do not forget your place. Joy lived in a narrow room behind the house, close enough to hear the hum of generators but far enough to be forgotten. The walls were thin. At night she could hear laughter from inside the main building, Zainab's friends visiting, music playing, glasses clinking. Sometimes she pressed her ear against the wall and imagined what it must feel like to be part of that world, if only for a moment. She never stayed on those thoughts for long. Dreaming had always been dangerous for Joy. She had been raised on disappointment. Passed from one relative to another after her mother died, she learned early that kindness often came with conditions. Food came with insults. Shelter came with reminders of her burden. By the time she was a teenager, she understood the unspoken rule. Gratitude meant obedience. Her body became the easiest target. Why are you so big? Who will ever want you? You eat like you're rich. Those words followed her everywhere, sticking to her like dust. Even when she laughed them off, they lived inside her, shaping the way she walked, the way she stood, the way she apologized for existing. At the Balogan house, Zainab was the loudest voice. Zainab Balogan was young, beautiful, and painfully aware of it. She moved through the world like it owed her applause. Whenever Joy crossed her path, Zainab made sure to notice. Joy, don't block the mirror, she would snap. Joy, are you sure you washed your hands? Joy, careful with that dress, one tear and you'll never pay it back. Sometimes it was worse when Zainab laughed. Joy never answered back. She nodded. She bowed her head. She swallowed everything. Only Mama Saad saw the truth. Mama Saad lived 2 houses away in a small concrete building with a rusted gate and a leaking roof. She sold cooked food by the roadside and survived on little, but her heart was wide. On Joy's days off, rare as they were, Joy would visit her sitting on a wooden stool while Mama Saad stirred soup over an open fire. You are not small, my child, Mama Saad would say gently. This world just tries to shrink people. It doesn't understand. Joy smiled when she heard that, though part of her didn't believe it. Life had taught her otherwise. Still, Mama Saad's words warmed her in a way no blanket ever could. Money was always tight. Joy sent part of her wages to Mama Sadi for food and medicine. The rest barely covered soap pads and the occasional painkiller. She owned 2 dresses outside her uniform. Both were faded. Both were carefully folded and hidden, as if preserving them might also preserve her dignity. Despite everything, Joy worked hard, not because she loved the job, but because she feared what would happen if she lost it. That fear grew stronger the week the party was announced. Zainab's birthday was approaching and the house transformed overnight. Decorators came and went, boxes of drinks stacked up in corners. Music blasted from speakers as Zainab practiced dancing in the living room, laughing loudly with her friends. Joy watched from the kitchen doorway unseen. "This one must be perfect," Funka said firmly one afternoon. "No embarrassment, no mistakes." Her eyes flicked toward Joy. Joy felt her stomach tighten. "Yes, Ma," she replied softly. From that day on, the pressure doubled. Plates had to shine brighter. Floors had to reflect light. Joy slept less, moved faster, and made herself even smaller. Late one night, after everyone had gone to bed, Joy sat on the edge of her narrow mattress and rubbed her aching feet. She stared at her reflection in a cracked mirror on the wall. The woman staring back looked tired, older than her years, heavy in ways that went beyond her body. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "Just endure. Just endure." In her pocket, her phone vibrated once. A message notification. No name displayed, just a number she hadn't saved but never forgot. Her chest tightened. She didn't open it. Not yet. Some connections carried memories too heavy to face in the dark. Outside, Lagos hummed with life. Cars passed. Music echoed from somewhere far away. The city never slept, but Joy felt invisible within it. Tomorrow, she knew, would be worse. The party would come. The guests would come. And Joy, in her oversized uniform, would stand among them unseen and exposed at the same time. She lay down, turned toward the wall, and closed her eyes, unaware that the silence she clung to was already beginning to break. By the time the sun rose over Lagos the next morning, the Balogan house was already buzzing with urgency. Funka Balogan stood in the middle of the living room, arms crossed, giving instructions with the precision of a general preparing for war. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. The flowers must arrive before noon. The chairs need to be arranged exactly as the planner said. "And I don't want to hear any excuses today." "Yes, Ma," the staff replied in unison. Joy stood near the doorway holding a notepad she was never allowed to write on. She listened carefully, committing every detail to memory. One mistake today would not be forgiven. Zainab descended the stairs in a silk robe, phone pressed to her ear, laughter spilling out as if the house existed only to echo her joy. She barely acknowledged her mother, much less Joy. No, the DJ must play the remix," she said loudly into the phone. "If it's boring, I'll die." She stopped abruptly when she noticed Joy standing there. "You!" Zainab snapped, snapping her fingers. "Did you polish the silver trays?" "Yeah." Joy answered quickly. Zainab's eyes traveled up and down Joy's body with open disgust. "Try not to sweat on them, and don't get in anyone's way today. This party isn't for people like you." Joy nodded, her face burning. "Yes, miss." Adewale Balogan watched the exchange from his armchair. He cleared his throat softly as if he wanted to say something, then looked away. He always did. Silence had become his contribution to peace. As the day went on, the house filled with strangers. Decorators adjusted lights. Caterers carried boxes in and out. Every corner glittered with effort meant to impress people who did not yet care. Joy moved like a shadow, cleaning after others, fetching what was needed before anyone asked. Her feet ached, but she ignored the pain. Pain was familiar. Mistakes were dangerous. At noon, Funka pulled her aside. "Joy," she said quietly, "you will serve drinks and collect empty glasses. Nothing else. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not wander, and do not embarrass this family." Joy bowed her head. "I understand, Ma." Funk studied her for a moment, eyes narrowing. "Make sure your uniform is clean, and try to stay out of sight." Those last words landed heavy. Joy returned to her small room behind the house to change. She washed her face with cold water, smoothed her uniform, and tied her hair back neatly. She stared at herself in the mirror again, forcing her shoulders straight. "Just today," she whispered. "Just survive today." As evening approached, the guests began to arrive. Luxury cars lined the street outside the Balogan mansion. Women stepped out in flowing dresses, perfume trailing behind them. Men adjusted cufflinks and laughed loudly, already half drunk on confidence. The air filled with music and excitement. Joy stood near the bar, holding a tray of glasses. Her arms trembled slightly under the weight, but she kept her balance. Eyes followed her wherever she went, some curious, some dismissive, some cruel. "She works here," one woman whispered, not quietly enough. At her size, another replied with a snicker. Joy pretended not to hear. She always did. Zainab floated through the room like a queen, soaking in attention. Tunde Ajayi walked beside her, hand resting possessively on her waist. He laughed loudly, greeting people with exaggerated confidence. When his eyes landed on Joy, they lit up not with kindness, but with opportunity. "Hey," he called, blocking her path. "Careful there." Joy stopped instantly. Sorry, sir. He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to humiliate. Didn't know they hired this kind of help. Zainab laughed loud and sharp. Tunda, stop. You'll hurt her feelings. The laughter around them grew. Joy felt her throat tighten. She lowered her eyes and stepped aside, heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. From across the room, Funka watched and did nothing. As the night deepened, the lights grew brighter and the music louder. Joy's feet throbbed. Her hands shook each time she picked up a glass. She reminded herself to breathe, to disappear into the background. But Zainab had other plans. She clinked her glass, calling for attention. Everyone, she announced. Before we cut the cake, I just want to say something. The room quieted. Joy froze. Zainab's gaze found her instantly. Joy, come here. The words sliced through the air. Joy hesitated, then stepped forward slowly, tray still in her hands. Every eye turned toward her. The room felt too bright, too open. Yes, miss, she whispered. Zainab smiled sweetly. Everyone, this is Joy, our house help. A ripple of murmurs followed. She's been with us for some time now, Zainab continued. Very hard-working, very noticeable. Laughter broke out. Joy's ears rang. Her hands tightened around the tray. Zainab circled her like a performer. Tell me, Joy, she said loudly, do you enjoy serving people who actually matter? The laughter grew louder. Joy's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Tunda joined in. At least she's in the right place. Plenty of food around. Someone clapped. Someone whistled. Joy felt something inside her crack, not loudly, not visibly, but deeply. Her vision blurred. Her chest burned with shame and helplessness. She searched the room for one face willing to stop it. Funka looked away. Adewale stared at the floor. No one intervened. Zainab leaned in close, her voice dripping with cruelty. Smile, Joy. This is what you're here for. That was when Joy felt it, the final push, the quiet decision forming beneath the humiliation. She took a slow breath. I need to step outside, she said softly, almost to herself. Without waiting for permission, she turned and walked away. Behind her, laughter followed, but it sounded distant now, like noise from another world. Outside, the night air hit her face, cool and grounding. Her hands shook as she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. The unread message still sat there. She opened it. Are you safe? Joy swallowed hard. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she typed a single line. I need you. She pressed send. Inside the house, the party went on, unaware that everything had already begun to change. Joy stood just beyond the iron gates of the Belogan mansion. The music still pulsing faintly behind her like a heartbeat she no longer belonged to. The night air carried the smell of rain-soaked earth and car exhaust, grounding her in a way the glittering lights inside never could. For the first time that evening, she allowed her shoulders to slump. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. Where are you? The message read. Joy exhaled a breath she felt she'd been holding for years. Outside. I'm okay, she typed, though her hands betrayed her with a slight tremor. She didn't add anything else. She didn't need to. The silence between those words carried more truth than she could fit on a screen. She leaned against the gate, closing her eyes. The laughter inside the house drifted out in waves, carefree, cruel, untouched by her pain. She pictured Zainab's smile the way it sharpened when it found a target. She pictured Funka's turned back Adewale's averted eyes. The images pressed against her chest like stones. Joy. The voice startled her. She opened her eyes to see Mama Saad standing on the sidewalk wrapped in a faded shawl, worry etched deep into her face. I saw the cars, Mama Saad said softly. I knew tonight would not be easy. Joy swallowed. I tried, she murmured. I really tried. Mama Saad stepped closer, her presence steady and familiar. Trying does not mean allowing yourself to be broken, she said. Come, sit. They sat on the low concrete curb. Mama Said reached into her bag and handed Joy a small bottle of water. Joy drank slowly, her throat tight. You remember what I told you? Mama Said, it continued. People who mock others do so because they are afraid of their own emptiness. Joy nodded, though doubt lingered. Sometimes it feels like emptiness has more power than kindness. Mama Saad smiled sadly. Only for a while. Joy's phone buzzed again. This time it rang. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. Then she answered. Joy came the voice on the other end, deep, calm, unmistakable. Talk to me. Her lips parted, but no words came. The silence stretched. Mama Said squeezed her hand, gently encouraging. They humiliated me, Joy finally said, her voice barely holding together, in front of everyone. There was a pause. Not confusion, not doubt, just controlled anger wrapped in restraint. Did you leave, he asked. Yes. Good, he said firmly. Stay where you are. The line went dead. Joy lowered the phone, her chest rising and falling fast. Mama Saad studied her face. Who was that, she asked. Joy hesitated. Someone from my past. Mama Said nodded knowingly. The past does not always come back to hurt us, she said. Sometimes it comes back to stand with us. They sat in silence for a moment longer. Then Mama Sadeh rose slowly. I should go, she said, but I will not be far. Joy watched her disappear into the shadows, the familiar ache of loneliness creeping back in. She glanced once more at the mansion, at the glowing windows, the music, the laughter, and felt something shift inside her. She did not want to go back inside. Minutes passed. The street grew quieter as guests settled into the party. Then from far away, a low hum reached her ears. At first, she thought it was traffic. The sound grew louder, deeper. It vibrated through the air, unmistakable. Joy looked up. The sky above Lagos shimmered with movement. A bright light cut through the darkness, descending steadily, purposefully. Inside the mansion, heads began to turn. Conversations faltered. What is that? Someone asked. Outside, Joy stood frozen, eyes wide as the sound intensified. Her phone rang again. Look up, the voice said. She did. A private jet sliced through the clouds, its lights blazing as it prepared to land nearby. The ground seemed to tremble beneath her feet. Inside the Balagoon house, confusion spread like fire. Is there an airport nearby? Who could that be? Is something wrong? Zainab frowned, irritation flickering across her face. Can someone turn down the music? The jet roared overhead, so close now it drowned out everything else. Guests moved toward the windows. Phones came out. Whispers turned into excited murmurs. Outside, Joy's knees felt weak. This isn't real, she whispered. Her phone vibrated once more. Stay where you are, the message read. I'm coming to you. A black SUV appeared at the end of the street, headlights cutting through the darkness. It slowed, then stopped in front of the gate. The driver stepped out and opened the door. Miss Adebamiro, he said respectfully. Please. Joy hesitated only a second before stepping forward. As she slid into the back seat, the door closed softly behind her, sealing her away from the night and from the version of herself who had stood helpless just moments before. The car pulled away smoothly. Inside the mansion, the party ground to a halt. The jet's roar echoed overhead one final time before fading into the distance, leaving behind stunned silence. Zainab's smile faltered. Funke's brow creased. Adewale looked toward the door, uneasy. No one knew yet what it meant. But somewhere between the sky and the ground, the balance had shifted, and Joy Adebamiro was no longer standing alone. Inside the Balogun mansion, the party struggled to recover its rhythm. The music resumed, but it sounded forced, now too loud, too deliberate, as if trying to drown out an unease no one wanted to name. Guests laughed again, yet their eyes kept drifting toward the windows, toward the door Joy had walked through minutes earlier. Zainab Balogun stood near the cake table, jaw tight, pretending not to notice the whispers swirling around her. Was that a jet so close to the estate? Who lands a private jet here? She hated distractions. Tonight was supposed to be about her beauty, her status, her moment, yet somehow the attention had slipped away. Tunde Ajayi leaned closer to her, lowering his voice. Relax, he said. Probably some politician showing off. Zainab forced a smile. Of course. But she didn't believe it. Funke Balogun watched the room carefully, her instincts sharp. She had hosted enough gatherings to know when a shift was coming. Something had unsettled the guests, and she didn't like not being in control of it. She glanced toward the back door, the one Joy had exited through. For a brief second, a thought flickered through her mind, uncomfortable and unwelcome. It couldn't be related to her. She dismissed it immediately. Joy was nobody. Just help. Just a girl who should have known her place. Adewale Balogun stood near the bar, nursing a drink he didn't really want. He replayed the scene in his head. Zainab's laughter, Joy's face, the way she had walked away without begging. Something about that memory sat heavy in his chest. She didn't deserve that, he murmured, barely audible. Funke shot him a sharp look. What did you say? Nothing, he replied quickly, eyes dropping again. The DJ switched tracks, trying to lift the mood. Some guests returned to dancing, but the energy had changed. Conversations were shorter. Laughter came in bursts, then stopped abruptly. Phones buzzed as messages were typed discreetly beneath tables. Outside, the streetlights reflected off polished cars. A few guests stepped out to take calls, their voices hushed but excited. "I swear it landed nearby. No, I saw the lights. They said it's owned by someone big." Zainab noticed people leaving the main hall and felt irritation spike. She clinked her glass again. "Everyone," she announced, forcing brightness into her tone. "Let's not lose the mood. Tonight is about celebration." Applause followed thin polite. As if on cue, a murmur rippled from the entrance. A security guard hurried inside, leaning toward Funke. He whispered something in her ear. Funke's face stiffened. "What do you mean they're asking?" she hissed softly. "They said they're here for Miss Adebamiro." The guard replied, clearly confused. The words landed like a slap. Funke straightened slowly. Who, she asked, though she already knew. "Joy Ma." The room seemed to tilt. Zainab frowned. "What is this nonsense?" she snapped. "Who is asking for her?" Before Funke could answer, movement at the doorway drew every eye. Two men in dark suits stepped inside. Their presence was calm, controlled, unmistakably authoritative. They scanned the room briefly before one of them spoke. "Good evening," he said politely. "We are looking for Joy Adebamiro." Silence fell. Every guest turned to look at Funke, at Zainab, at the empty space where Joy had stood earlier. Zainab laughed nervously. "This is a private event," she said. "You must be mistaken." The man met her gaze evenly. "We are not." Whispers exploded across the room. Did they say her name? The maid. What is going on? Adewale felt his heart pound. He took a step forward before he could stop himself. She left," he said. "She went outside." The man nodded. "Thank you." He turned to leave his colleague following close behind. Zainab stared after them, her confidence unraveling. "Mum," she whispered sharply. "What is happening?" Funke didn't answer. Her mind raced. She replayed Joy's quiet obedience, her silence, her exit. Something didn't add up. Outside, engines hummed. The SUV that had arrived earlier waited at the curb doors, opening smoothly. A small group of guests had followed the suited men, curiosity overpowering discretion. "What is all this?" someone asked. Then they saw her. Joy stepped out of the vehicle slowly. She was no longer wearing her maid uniform. The dress she wore now was simple but elegant, tailored perfectly to her body. Her hair was styled neatly, framing her face. Her posture was different, straight, grounded, unashamed. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. The crowd fell silent. Zainab pushed her way forward, eyes wide. "Joy," she said, disbelief creeping into her voice. Joy didn't respond. A second car arrived, followed by another. Then, from the direction of the nearby landing strip, headlights approached, slow, deliberate. A tall man stepped out of the lead vehicle. His presence commanded attention without effort. He adjusted his jacket, his gaze locking onto Joy immediately. Relief softened his features. "Joy," he said quietly. She looked up at him, her eyes shining not with tears this time, but with recognition. "Maid," she replied. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered the name. Olumide Adebamiro, the Olumide Adebamiro, the aviation magnate. Phones rose instantly. Olumide turned to the guests, his expression calm but unyielding. "Good evening," he said. "I apologize for the interruption." Funke's legs felt weak. "Sir," she managed, forcing a smile, "there must be some misunderstanding. Joy is our—" Olumide raised a hand, silencing her effortlessly. "My sister," he said clearly, "was humiliated in this house tonight." The word sister echoed like thunder. Joy stood beside him, no longer invisible, no longer small. Zainab's face drained of color. "Sister," she whispered. "That's impossible." Olumide's gaze settled on her. "Nothing about her is impossible," he replied. The crowd held its breath. Inside the mansion, the party lights still glowed, untouched by the truth about to unfold. But outside, under the open Lagos sky, the story had shifted irrevocably. And for the first time that night, Joy Adebamiro stood not as a servant, but as someone seen. The silence outside the Balogan mansion was heavy, almost sacred, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Joy stood beside Olumide Adebamiro, her hands clasped lightly in front of her posture, calm but resolute. She could feel dozens of eyes on her eyes that had once looked through her, over her, or down on her. Now those same eyes searched her face for explanations, for cracks, for something that would return the world to its familiar order. But nothing did. Zainab Balogan broke the silence first, her voice sharp with disbelief. "This is ridiculous," she said, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. "You're saying she's your sister? That's some kind of joke, right?" Olumide's expression didn't change. "No," he replied evenly. "It's the truth." Funke Balogan stepped forward, her movements stiff. "Sir." With all due respect, she said carefully, "Joy has worked in this house for years. If she were truly related to someone like you, surely we would have known." Olumide turned his gaze to her. It was not angry, but it was piercing. "You knew what you chose to see," he said quietly, "and you chose to see a maid." A murmur rippled through the gathered guests. Joy felt a strange sensation rising in her chest, not triumph, not revenge, but something steadier. Validation. For years she had carried the weight of being unseen. Now the truth stood on her side, solid and undeniable. "Joy," Olumide said softly, turning to her, "Are you all right?" She met his eyes. "I am now." The simplicity of her answer struck harder than any accusation. Adewale Balogun finally found his voice. "Mr. Adebamiro," he said hesitantly, "if I may ask, how is this possible? Why was she here living like this?" Olumide exhaled slowly. "Because life doesn't always protect the vulnerable," he said, "and because mistakes some mind can echo for years." He glanced at Joy, a silent apology passing between them. "We share the same father," Olumide continued, addressing the crowd. "Different mothers. When our father died, Joy was sent away. I was young, powerless. By the time I found her, she had already learned how to survive alone." Joy remembered that time vividly, the promise made, and broken the waiting, the belief that eventually faded into acceptance. She had never blamed Olumide fully. Life had been complicated. Pain rarely had a single villain. "I tried to stay connected," Olumide said, "but distance and pride built walls. Still, we never truly lost each other." Zainab scoffed. "So she just forgot to mention she had a billionaire brother." Joy turned to her, then her voice calm but firm. "I didn't forget," she said. "I chose not to speak, because when I needed kindness, I learned that names and connections didn't guarantee it." The words landed quietly, but they landed deep. Funke felt heat creep up her neck. "If this is all true," she said tightly, "then why did she continue working here? Why didn't she say anything when you mocked me?" Joy asked gently but directly. "When your daughter laughed at my body, when your guests treated me like entertainment?" Funke fell silent. Tunde Ajayi shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how exposed he was. "Look," he muttered, "it was just jokes. People are too sensitive these days." Olumide's eyes snapped to him. "Humiliation is not humor," he said coldly, "and cruelty doesn't become harmless because it's wrapped in laughter." Tunde opened his mouth, then closed it again. The crowd's attention pressed in on him from all sides. He stepped back, distancing himself from Zainab without realizing it. Zainab noticed. "Tunde," she whispered. He didn't answer. Joy watched the exchange with a strange calm. She felt no urge to gloat. The unraveling was happening on its own. "Why come now?" Funke asked suddenly, her voice trembling despite her effort to control it. "Why make a spectacle of this?" Olumide looked around at the gathered faces, the phones recording the whispers, growing louder. "I didn't come for spectacle," he said. "I came because my sister called me, because she was hurting, and because no one should be humiliated and expected to stay silent." He placed a hand gently on Joy's shoulder. "This," he added, "is not about wealth. It's about dignity." A hush fell over the crowd. Joy felt tears prick her eyes, not of sadness but of release. For the first time, someone had spoken the truth out loud on her behalf. A guest stepped forward cautiously. "Miss Joy," she said softly, I'm sorry for laughing earlier." Another nodded. "I didn't know." Joy met their eyes. "You didn't ask," she replied, "but apology accepted." Zainab's voice cracked. "You're enjoying this," she accused, pointing at Joy. "You planned this." Joy shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "I planned to survive the night, nothing more." Olumide turned back to Funke and Adewale. "We will be leaving now," he said. "Joy no longer works here." Funk's composure finally broke. "We can talk about this privately," she pleaded. There was no privacy when she was humiliated." Olumide interrupted gently. Tonight, the truth breathes in the open. He extended his arm to Joy. She took it. As they walked toward the waiting vehicles, the guests parted instinctively, creating a path where once there had been none. The music inside the mansion faded into irrelevance. Zainab stood frozen, her world tilting. "You can't just walk away," she said weakly. Joy paused. She turned back one last time. "I already did," she said. The engine started. Doors closed softly. As the convoy pulled away, the Balogan mansion stood glowing behind them, unchanged in structure but stripped of its illusion. Inside, the party was over, and on the road ahead, Joy Adebamiro felt something unfamiliar settle into her chest. Peace. The convoy moved smoothly through the quiet Lagos streets' headlights, cutting long paths through the darkness. Inside the lead vehicle, Joy sat beside Olumide, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The city lights reflected faintly on the window, blurring into streaks of gold and white. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Joy's mind replayed the night in fragments, the laughter, the heat in her face, the sound of her own footsteps as she walked away. It felt distant now, as if it had happened to someone else. Olumide glanced at her. "You don't have to say anything," he said gently. "I know," Joy replied. Her voice surprised her with its steadiness. "But I want to." She took a slow breath. "I didn't call you to save me." Olumide nodded. "I know. I called because I didn't want to feel alone anymore," she continued. "Not tonight. Not again." He reached over and rested his hand lightly over hers. "You were never alone," he said. "I just didn't show up soon enough." Joy looked at him, then really looked. The man beside her carried confidence and success easily, but beneath it, she could see something familiar, regret shaped by years of unanswered questions. "Do you remember the last time we saw each other?" she asked quietly. Olumide smiled faintly. "You were holding a blue bag," he said. "Too big for you. You kept dragging it behind you." Joy laughed softly, the sound small but genuine. "I thought you would come back the next day." "I meant to," he said. Life moved faster than I expected. They fell silent again, this time more comfortably. The car pulled into a private compound near the landing strip. The jet rested nearby, its lights dim now, powerful but patient. Kunle Ogunlai stood waiting, clipboard tucked under his arm. He inclined his head respectfully when Joy stepped out. "Welcome, Ma," he said. The word made her pause. Olumide noticed. "If you prefer—" She shook her head. "I'm just not used to it." "You will be," he replied softly. They moved into a quiet lounge near the hangar. Warm light filled the room, genital and unthreatening. A tray of tea appeared untouched. Joy sat down slowly, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Her body felt heavy, but her chest felt light for the first time in years. "What happens now?" she asked. Olumide considered the question carefully. "Now you rest," he said. "Tomorrow we decide together." Joy nodded. Together. The word felt new. Meanwhile, back at the Balogan mansion, the aftermath settled like dust after a storm. The guests had left in a hurry, some embarrassed, some angry, some buzzing with gossip. Phones lit up across the city as videos circulated, captions growing more dramatic by the minute. "Did you see her, the maid?" She arrived with Olumide Adebamiro. Funke Balogan sat alone in the living room, the decorations now garish in the silence. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up a glass she hadn't realized she was holding. Adewale stood near the doorway, unsure where to place himself. "Funke," he began cautiously. "Maybe we should talk about what she snapped, about how we were humiliated in our own house." He flinched. "About how we treated her." Funke's eyes flashed. "She deceived us." Adewale shook his head slowly. "No, we chose not to see her." The words hung between them, heavy and unavoidable. Zainab stormed down the stairs, the makeup-smeared phone clutched tightly in her hand. "Do you know what people are saying?" she cried. "They're laughing at us." Funke stood abruptly. "This is not my fault," she said sharply. "If she had been honest, if you had been kind—" Adewale interrupted, surprising even himself. Zainab turned on him. "Don't start," she warned. "You never defend us." Adewale met her gaze. "Tonight I failed her," he said quietly, "and I failed myself." Zainab scoffed and turned away, dialing her phone. "Tunde," she said when he answered, "we need to talk." There was a pause. Then his voice came through, distant. "I don't think that's a good idea right now." "What do you mean?" Zainab demanded. "I mean, this is messy," he replied. "I don't need this kind of attention." The line went dead. Zainab stared at her phone, disbelief giving way to panic. The laughter she had wielded so easily earlier now echoed back at her sharp and mocking. Across the city, Mama Saad sat on her bedphone in hand, eyes wide as she watched a video someone had sent her. Joy stepping out of the car, Joy standing tall, Joy beside Olamide. Tears welled up, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. "My child," she whispered, "they finally saw you." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Joy woke in a quiet room overlooking the runway. For a moment, she didn't recognize where she was. Then memory returned, gentle, reassuring. She sat up slowly, listening to the distant sounds of the city waking. There was no shouting, no commands, no fear of being late. A knock came at the door, Joy Olamide's voice. "Breakfast is ready, no rush," she smiled. As she joined him at the table, Joy noticed a newspaper folded neatly to the side. Her name appeared in bold letters, "From Maid to Adabamiro. A night Lagos won't forget." Her stomach tightened. "I don't want to be a headline," she said quietly. Olamide folded the paper away. "Then you won't be," he replied. "You will be yourself. That's enough." Joy sipped her tea, warmth spreading through her. Outside, planes prepared for takeoff, engines humming with promise. For years her life had been about endurance. Now, standing at the edge of something new, Joy felt the unfamiliar thrill of choice. And somewhere deep within her, a question began to form, not about revenge or wealth or recognition, but about who she could become when no one was trying to shrink her anymore. Joy did not leave the runway compound for 3 days. Not because Olamide insisted, and not because she was afraid to face the world, but because her body and spirit demanded stillness. For the first time in years, no one knocked on her door to give orders. No one reminded her of time, mistakes, or consequences. The silence was not empty. It was healing. Each morning she woke to the sound of planes lifting into the sky. The engines roared, then softened into distance like a promise repeated again and again. She stood by the window with a cup of tea, watching the silver shapes rise, and wondered how many lives inside those aircraft were changing at that very moment. Olamide gave her space. He checked in quietly, always asking, never assuming. Sometimes he left books by her door. Other times he sent messages that said nothing more than "Are you eating?" or "I'm here." Joy appreciated that more than grand gestures. On the 4th day, she asked to go out. "I don't want to hide," she told him. "Not anymore." Olamide nodded. "Then we won't." They drove into the city in a modest car, no convoy this time. Joy wore a simple dress and flat shoes. She did not want to announce herself. She wanted to feel the city again, its noise, its heat, its contradictions. Lagos did not disappoint. Markets buzzed with life. Hawkers called out prices. Buses honked impatiently. Music spilled from open doors. The city looked the same as it always had, but Joy felt different moving through it. People stared. Some recognized her. Others whispered. A few smiled with curiosity. Joy kept her gaze forward, breathing steadily. They stopped at a small cafe near the waterfront. As Joy stepped inside, a young woman behind the counter froze. "It's you," she said softly, eyes wide. Joy hesitated. "Yes." The woman's face softened. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. "I shared that video before I thought about how it might feel." Joy considered her words, then nodded. "Thank you for saying that." They sat by the window watching boats drift lazily across the water. "This attention won't last forever," Olamide said carefully. "But what you choose to do now, that will." Joy stirred her drink slowly. "I don't want to become a symbol," she said. "I just want to live honestly." "That's harder," Olamide replied, "but more powerful." Later that afternoon, Joy asked to visit Mama Sade. The old woman's house looked smaller than Joy remembered, but the warmth inside was unchanged. Mama Sade gasped when she saw Joy standing at her doorway, not in a uniform, not bowed, but upright and calm. "You came back," Mama Sade whispered. "I never left," Joy replied, embracing her gently. They sat together, hands clasped, speaking in fragments of nights endured of kindness, remembered of wounds that still ached. "I was afraid," Mama Sade admitted, "that power would change you." Joy smiled softly. "It gave me space," she said. "The rest is still my choice." That evening, Olumide invited Joy to his home. The house was modern and expansive, filled with art and quiet confidence. Yet Joy's attention was drawn to the small details: a framed photo on the shelf, a worn book by the sofa, a plant watered too often. "You live alone," she observed. Olumide smiled faintly. "Success is loud," he said. "Loneliness is quiet." They sat across from each other, the weight of years between them. I don't want to control your future, Olumide said. I want to support it. Joy nodded. Then let me decide. That night, as Joy lay in a guest room larger than her entire former living space, sleep did not come easily. Her mind wandered back to the Balogan mansion, the laughter, the cruelty, the silence that had protected it. She wondered how Zainab was coping, how Funke slept at night, whether Adawal's conscience had finally found a voice. The next morning, the answer came sooner than expected. A message appeared on Joy's phone. Unknown number. I want to talk. Joy stared at it for a long time. Do you have to? Olumide asked gently when she showed him. No, Joy replied. But I think I should. They agreed to meet in a public place. Funke Balogan arrived early, her posture stiff, her eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. She looked smaller without the power of her home and her guests. Thank you for coming, Funke said quietly. Joy took a seat across from her. You wanted to talk. Funke folded her hands tightly. I've been thinking, she began. About what happened, about my role. Joy listened without interruption. I won't excuse my behavior. Funke continued. I allowed cruelty to exist in my house because it was convenient, because it protected my image. Joy met her gaze. And now I see the cost, Funke said. Her voice cracked. I lost respect, from others, from myself. Joy considered her carefully. Why are you telling me this? Funke exhaled shakily. Because I owe you an apology. Not as a maid, as a human being. The words were simple, not dramatic, but sincere. Joy nodded slowly. I accept, she said, not because it fixes the past, but because I don't want to carry it forward. Funke's eyes filled with tears. What will you do now? Joy leaned back, thinking. I don't know yet, she admitted, but I know what I won't do. She stood, signaling the end of the conversation. I won't shrink, Joy said softly, not for anyone. As she walked away, Funke remained seated, staring into her untouched cup of tea. Back at Olumide's home, Joy stood on the balcony watching the sun dip low over the city. The noise of Lagos rose to meet the evening, vibrant and relentless. For the first time, Joy did not feel like she was standing at the mercy of the world. She felt like she was standing at its edge, ready to step forward, not because she had been lifted, but because she had learned to stand. Even after Funke Balogan's apology, Joy did not feel instantly healed. Healing, she realized, wasn't a door you walked through once. It was a road, long, uneven, sometimes quiet, sometimes loud. Some mornings she woke up strong, almost glowing with relief. Other mornings she woke with the old ache in her chest, the echo of laughter still fresh in her ears. Olumide watched her carefully without hovering. He knew the difference between protection and control, and he refused to treat Joy like a fragile project. Still, his presence, steady, patient, was a kind of safety Joy had never known. One evening, as Lagos traffic crawled below like a river of headlights, Joy sat with Olumide in his living room. The air smelled faintly of coffee. A soft instrumental song played in the background. Joy stared at the framed photo on the shelf again. A younger Olumide, maybe in his early 20s, stood beside an older man, tall, dignified, stern-faced. They looked similar in the jaw and the eyes. Our father, Joy whispered. Olumide's gaze followed hers. He nodded slowly. Yes, Joy swallowed. I used to imagine what he would say if he saw me now. Olumide leaned back, thoughtful. Sometimes I think about what he would say if he saw me, he admitted. All the money, all the power, and yet the one person I should have protected was left to struggle. Joy's voice softened. It wasn't only you. Olumide's eyes met hers, but it was partly me, he insisted. And I don't want to run from it anymore. He stood and walked to a drawer near his desk. When he returned, he placed an old envelope on the table in front of Joy. The paper looked worn, as if it had been opened and resealed many times in private. What is this? Joy asked. Olumide hesitated. Something I should have shown you years ago. Joy opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter written in neat handwriting. The top line made her breath catch. To my children, Olumide and Joy. Joy's fingers trembled. Olumide watched quietly as she read. The letter was not long, but every sentence carried weight. Their father spoke of regret of choices made in pride of families, divided by fear and secrecy. He admitted he had failed Joy's mother. He admitted he had not planned well for Joy's future. And then in the final paragraphs, he wrote something that made Joy's eyes sting. If you ever find each other again, do not let bitterness be your inheritance. Let love be the thing you build when I am gone. Joy blinked hard, reading the line again and again. Olamid's voice came softly. He left that letter with my mother. She gave it to me after his burial. I read it, and instead of acting, I got angry. I told myself I would fix everything with money someday. Joy looked up, tears shining, but money didn't fix time. No, Olamid admitted, and I wasted too much of it. Joy placed the letter gently back into the envelope. She held it to her chest for a moment as if it were something alive. I'm not angry, she said finally. I'm just tired of carrying questions. Olamid nodded. Then let's answer them, he said. The next day, they drove to the outskirts of Lagos to visit the place Joy's mother was buried. It was a small cemetery, quiet, modest, the kind of place people passed without noticing. Joy stepped out of the car, slowly, the heat wrapping around her like a thick blanket. She walked between the rows, her heart pounding like she was approaching a stranger. When she saw the grave, she stopped. The stone was simple. Her mother's name etched softly, already fading from the weather. Joy knelt. For a long moment she didn't speak. The silence around her was loud with memory. She remembered her mother's hands, strong, worn, always working. She remembered her mother's voice telling her stories at night when there was no food, just hope. I'm sorry, Joy whispered. I've been trying to survive for so long that I forgot to live. A tear slipped down her cheek. Olamid stood behind her, respectful, silent. When Joy finally rose, she turned to him. She would have wanted us to find each other, Joy said. Olamide's eyes softened. I know. As they walked back toward the car, Joy's phone buzzed. A message from Mama Saad. People are talking. They say you are rich now. They say you will forget us. Joy paused, the words stinging. Olamide glanced at her. What is it? Joy showed him. He frowned. That's what fame does, he said. It turns your life into a rumor. Joy stared at the message again. But I don't want Mama Saad to feel that fear. Then don't let her. Olamide replied, let your actions speak louder. That evening, Joy asked Olamide to take her to the place she used to buy food when she couldn't afford full meals, the roadside stall near a busy junction where vendors sold rice and stew in small plastic bowls. When they arrived, the woman behind the stall stared at Joy, recognition flickering in her eyes. Joy! She gasped. Is it you? Joy smiled gently. It's me. The woman's expression shifted from surprise to excitement. Ah, so it's true, she exclaimed loudly. You are now a big woman. People nearby turned. Phones lifted. Whispers started instantly. Joy felt her chest tighten, but she held her ground. I'm still Joy, she said calmly. I just have more choices now. The vendor laughed and reached across the counter to squeeze her hand. You deserve it, she said, voice tender. Joy's eyes warmed. I came because I want to do something, she said. Not for attention, for purpose. Olamid watched her curious. What are you thinking? Joy looked around at the faces, young boys carrying trays, tired mothers balancing babies on their hips, men with hollow eyes staring into tomorrow. Work, Joy said. Dignified work for women like me. Women who are treated like they don't matter. Olamid's brows lifted slightly. You want to start something? Joy nodded. A program, she said slowly, the words forming as she spoke. Training, jobs, a safe place to sleep for women who have no one. Not charity that humiliates, opportunity that restores. Olamid's expression softened into pride. Then we will build it, he said. But you will lead it. Joy inhaled sharply at that. Led. The word felt heavy and holy. That night when they returned home, Joy sat at a desk for the first time in her life and began writing ideas on paper. She wrote names, numbers, needs, steps. Her handwriting was shaky at first, then steadier as hope took shape. Outside the window, Lagos kept moving fast, relentless, alive. And inside, Joy. Adebamiro was no longer simply recovering from humiliation. She was turning pain into purpose. The idea refused to leave Joy's mind. Even after she put down her pen that night, the words she had written seemed to glow on the page, training dignity, shelter, choice. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of generators in the distance. For the first time, her thoughts were not circling pain. They were moving forward. At dawn, she rose early and returned to the desk. Olamid found her there an hour later, hair loosely tied back, sleeves rolled up. Papers spread across the surface like pieces of a puzzle. She looked up when he entered, eyes bright but tired. "You didn't sleep?" he observed. "I slept enough," Joy replied. "This feels urgent." He smiled faintly and pulled out a chair across from her. "Show me." Joy took a breath. "I don't want this to become something that makes people feel small," she began. "I've lived that life. I don't want handouts that humiliate. I want systems that teach women how to stand on their own feet." Olamide nodded slowly, listening. "I was thinking," Joy continued, "we start with training basic skills that actually lead to work. Housekeeping, yes, but with certification. Catering, childcare, laundry services, even simple admin work, things that are respected. And housing." Olamide asked. "A temporary shelter," Joy said. "Not forever, just enough time for them to rebuild." Olamide leaned back thoughtful. "You're describing an organization." Joy swallowed. "That's what scares me." "Good," he replied gently. "Fear means it matters." By mid-morning they were on the phone with Kunla Ogunlia, who arrived with a folder thicker than Joy expected. Locations were discussed, budgets outlined, legal steps mentioned carefully. Joy listened closely, occasionally interrupting to ask questions. She wasn't pretending to understand, she was learning. Later that afternoon, Olamide suggested they visit one of his company's warehouses on the edge of the city. "This space isn't being used," he explained as they drove. "I've been meaning to repurpose it." The building was large but weathered. Dust coated the floors. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating forgotten corners. Joy walked slowly through the space, her footsteps echoing. "This could work," she said softly. "Classrooms here, sleeping quarters there, a kitchen in the back." She turned to Olamide, excitement building. "We can make this beautiful," he smiled. "We will." Word traveled fast. Within days, Joy's name appeared again, this time in quieter headlines. Not gossip, but curiosity. Joy Adebamiro launches initiative for women's empowerment. Joy didn't read most of them. She was too busy meeting people. Mama Sade was one of the first. When Joy explained the idea, Mama Sade nodded slowly, pride shining in her eyes. "You are doing what pain taught you," she said, "turning it into shelter for others." "Will you help me?" Joy asked. Mama Sade laughed. "I have been waiting for this question all my life." Soon after, women began to arrive. Some came cautiously, unsure if the offer was real. Others came desperate, carrying children, hope hanging by a thread. Joy met each one personally. She listened more than she spoke. Their stories were different, but the wounds were familiar. "I worked for 10 years. One woman said, eyes downcast. "They sent me away without pay." "My husband left," another whispered. "His family said I was useless." Joy didn't promise miracles. She promised honesty. "We will work," she told them. "It won't be easy, but you will not be invisible here." The program launched quietly. No grand opening, no cameras, just work. Joy was there every morning, sleeves rolled up, learning alongside the women. She cleaned, cooked, trained, listened. When exhaustion crept in, she reminded herself why she started. Olamide watched from a respectful distance, stepping in only when asked. He admired Joy's refusal to hide behind his power. One evening, as they walked through the now busy warehouse, laughter echoed off the walls. "You've built more than a program," Olamide said. "You've built community." Joy smiled, tired but fulfilled. "I've built what I needed when no one showed up, but life rarely allows growth without resistance." A week later, Joy received a message that made her stomach tighten. Zainab Balogan had requested a meeting. Joy stared at the screen, heart pounding. "Do you want to see her?" Olamide asked carefully. Joy hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted, "but running away won't give me peace." They agreed to meet in a neutral place, a quiet cafe far from the noise of attention. Zainab arrived late. She looked different, less polished. Her confidence worn thin by days of public scrutiny. She sat across from Joy, hands clasped tightly. "I didn't come to fight," Zainab said abruptly. Joy studied her, searching for sincerity. "Then why are you here?" Zainab swallowed. "Because everything I built my identity on collapsed in one night. And I don't know who I am without it." Joy listened without interruption. "I was cruel," Zainab continued, voice cracking. "Because cruelty made me feel powerful, and now I feel empty." Joy considered her carefully. "Power built on humiliation never lasts," she said gently. Zainab nodded, tears pooling. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said quickly. "I don't deserve it. I needed you to know I see you now." Joy leaned back, breathing slowly. Seeing me now doesn't change what happened, she said, but it might change who you become next. Zainab looked up, hope flickering. Is there anything I can do? Joy paused. The answer surprised even herself. Yes, she said. Go learn how to treat people with dignity, especially those who can't give you anything in return. Zainab nodded silently. They parted without drama, without reconciliation. But something important had shifted. That night, Joy returned home exhausted. She sat on the balcony watching the city lights blink like distant stars. You handled that with grace, Alameda said quietly. Joy smiled faintly. Grace is easier when you're no longer trying to prove your worth. Below them, Lagos moved endlessly forward, cars, people, dreams colliding and separating. Joy rested her hands on the railing, feeling the cool metal beneath her palms. The humiliation that once defined her had lost its grip. In its place stood something stronger. Purpose. The first real test of Joy's new life came quietly without warning. It arrived not as laughter or insults, but as paperwork. Joy sat at the long wooden table in the warehouse office, surrounded by files and forms. Outside, women moved between classrooms and workstations, their voices blending into a steady hum of purpose. The program had grown faster than Joy expected. With growth came attention, and with attention came scrutiny. Kunle Ogunle stood across from her, reading from a document. We received a notice this morning, he said carefully. An inspection. Joy looked up. From who? Multiple agencies, Kunle replied. Labor, safety, finance. It's routine, but the timing is pointed. Joy understood immediately. Nothing that challenged the old order ever went unchallenged. She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. When she asked, tomorrow. That night, sleep eluded her. She walked through the quiet warehouse, checking doors, reviewing lists in her head. Every corner held a memory of effort, women learning to read invoices, others practicing skills they had been told were beyond them. Joy felt the weight of responsibility press into her chest. Alameda found her sitting alone near midnight, paperwork spread around her like fallen leaves. You're carrying this alone again, he said gently. Joy sighed. I don't want to fail them. Alameda pulled up a chair. You won't, he said. But you don't have to do this by yourself. She nodded, though fear still flickered in her eyes. What if they're looking for a reason to shut us down? Then we give them none, he replied calmly. The next morning, the inspectors arrived, 3 men and 1 woman, all business, all distance. They walked through the facility, clipboards in hand, eyes sharp. Joy greeted them respectfully. She answered questions honestly. She did not embellish. She did not shrink. At one point, an inspector paused near the sleeping quarters. These women aren't employees yet, he said. Why are you housing them? Joy met his gaze. Because hunger and fear don't disappear just because paperwork is pending, she said. Stability creates productivity. The inspector raised an eyebrow. That's not standard. Joy nodded. Neither is dignity. But we're practicing it here. The woman inspector glanced at Joy, something unreadable passing over her face. She wrote something down and moved on. Hours passed. Sweat gathered at Joy's temples, but she held her ground. When the inspectors finally left, they offered no conclusions. It could go either way, Kunle said later, trying to sound reassuring. Joy forced a smile. Then we wait. Waiting was harder than action. News began to circulate again, this time not just about Joy's rise, but about her work. Opinions divided quickly. She's doing too much. She thinks money gives her authority. Who does she think she is? Joy tried not to read the comments, but they found her anyway. One evening, Mama Said called. They are saying ugly things, Mama Saad said, worry heavy in her voice, that you are using poor women for attention. Joy closed her eyes. I expected that. Does it hurt? Mama Saad asked. Joy thought for a moment. Not the way it used to, she replied, because I know why I'm here. The call ended, but the unease remained. 2 days later, the decision arrived. Kunle burst into the warehouse breathless. They approved everything he said, barely containing his excitement. All clear, full compliance. For a moment, Joy couldn't speak. Then her knees weakened and she had to sit. Approved. The word felt like oxygen. Cheers erupted as the news spread. Women hugged one another. Some cried openly. Joy stood in the center of it all, heart full and aching at once. Olamide caught her eye from across the room. He didn't clap. He simply nodded. Proud, steady, unwavering. That night, Joy returned to the place where everything had begun. The Belogan mansion stood quiet now, gates closed, lights dim. Joy didn't plan to go inside. She simply stood across the street, hands folded, breathing slowly. She wasn't there for confrontation. She was there for closure. Adewale Balogun stepped out unexpectedly, startled when he saw her. "Joy," he said softly. She nodded. "Sir." He hesitated, then spoke. "I've been thinking about that night," he said, "about my silence." Joy waited. "I failed you," Adewale continued, "and I failed as a man." Joy studied him carefully. "Acknowledging that matters," she said. "But what you do next matters more." Adewale nodded slowly. "I'm leaving the house," he said. "I can't live with what we allowed." Joy felt a quiet respect rise within her. "I hope you find peace," she said sincerely. She turned and walked away before he could say more. Back home, Joy sat on her balcony watching the city breathe. The sounds of Legos, honking laughter, distant music wrapped around her like a familiar song. Olamide joined her with 2 cups of tea. "You've crossed another bridge," he said. Joy smiled faintly. "I'm realizing something," she replied. "Justice doesn't always look like punishment." Olamide considered her words. "What does it look like then?" Joy said. "And responsibility." As the night deepened, Joy reflected on the strange path that had brought her here, from humiliation to purpose, from silence to leadership. She knew challenges would come again. Systems didn't change without resistance. But she also knew this: no one could take away what she had built, not with laughter, not with cruelty, not with doubt. Because this time Joy Adebamiro was not standing alone. Success did not arrive with applause. It arrived with responsibility. As the weeks passed, Joy's program began to attract more women than the warehouse could comfortably hold. Some came from nearby neighborhoods. Others traveled hours after hearing whispers of a place where no one shouted at you for being poor. Joy felt the pressure immediately. Growth, she learned, could be just as dangerous as neglect if it wasn't handled carefully. One morning she stood in the center of the warehouse watching the women work. Laughter floated from the training area. In another corner, a group practiced bookkeeping, pencils scratching steadily across paper. It was beautiful and overwhelming. "We're reaching capacity," Kunle said quietly beside her. "If we don't expand carefully, quality will suffer." Joy nodded. "I won't turn this into a factory of promises," she said. "If we can't do it well, we won't do it fast." That decision didn't please everyone. A local organization approached Joy with an offer: sponsorship, media exposure, fast funding. The catch was subtle but clear. They wanted control over the narrative. Interviews, photo opportunities, carefully selected stories that fit a polished image. Joy listened, then shook her head. "These women are not props," she said calmly. "Their dignity is not marketing." The representative frowned. "That kind of attitude limits growth." Joy met his gaze, then let growth wait. That evening, Olamide found her pacing on the balcony. "You did the right thing," he said. Joy sighed. "Sometimes doing the right thing feels like pushing against the tide." "That's because it is," he replied gently. Despite the challenges, progress continued. Women graduated from training and began working, some within Olamide's companies, others in partnerships Joy had quietly negotiated. The first paychecks were small, but the pride they carried was immense. One afternoon, a woman named Aisha approached Joy holding an envelope with shaking hands. "I rented a room," Aisha said, eyes shining. "For the first time. It's mine." Joy hugged her tightly, tears blurring her vision. Moments like that reminded her why the work mattered, but not all reactions were positive. One night, as Joy returned home late, her phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages poured in, screenshots, links, whispers of something brewing online. A video had surfaced. It showed Joy at the Balogun party, frozen in humiliation, laughter ringing around her. Someone had edited it cruelly, looping the moment, adding mocking captions. The comments were brutal. She deserved it. Money changed her, but she's still the same. Why pretend to be a hero? Joy's chest tightened as old wounds reopened. Olamide found her sitting on the edge of the bed, phone clenched tightly in her hand. "They're trying to drag you back into the past," he said quietly. Joy nodded, voice unsteady. "I thought I was past this." "You are," Olamide said firmly. "But healing doesn't erase memory. It teaches you how to stand when memory knocks." The next morning, Joy made a decision. She didn't issue a statement. She didn't defend herself online. Instead, she invited the women from the program to gather. They sat in a circle, the warehouse quiet and attentive. "There's something happening outside these walls," Joy said honestly. "People are trying to reduce us to moments of pain." The women listened, faces serious. I won't pretend it doesn't hurt. Joy continued, but I want you to understand something. When the world laughs, it's because it doesn't want to look closely, and we are asking it to look closely at dignity, at effort, at growth. She paused, breathing deeply. No video can undo what you've built with your hands, she said. No comment can erase your progress. The room was silent, then one woman began to clap. Another joined. Soon the warehouse filled with applause that wasn't loud but steady. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. A message arrived from an international foundation, one that had quietly observed Joy's work without demanding attention. They offered funding, yes, but more importantly, autonomy. Joy read the message twice, then a third time. They trust you, Olamide said softly. Joy closed her eyes, relief washing over her. That changes everything. With new support, Joy expanded carefully. A second location opened in another part of the city. Training programs deepened. Mentors joined. Systems strengthened. Joy didn't rush. She measured each step against her original promise. No humiliation, no shortcuts, no forgetting where she came from. One evening, as Joy reviewed reports in her office, a familiar name appeared in an email subject line. Zainab Balogan. Joy stared at it for a long moment before opening it. I've been volunteering at a shelter, the message read. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted you to know that your word stayed with me. Joy exhaled slowly. She didn't reply, but she didn't delete it either. That night, Joy walked through the warehouse after everyone had left. The lights were dim. The space hummed quietly like a heart at rest. She stopped in the center of the room and closed her eyes. She remembered the night she had stood frozen under cruel laughter, the feeling of being trapped, of being small. Then she opened her eyes and looked around at the chairs, the tools, the spaces filled with possibility. She was no longer defined by what had been done to her. She was defined by what she had built in response. On the balcony later, Olumide joined her, handing her a cup of tea. You're carrying this well, he said. Joy smiled softly. I learned that pain doesn't disappear when you succeed, she replied. It transforms when you give it purpose. Below them, the city glowed, restless, alive, imperfect. Joy rested her hands on the railing, steady and sure. The world had tried to break her once. Now it was learning something else entirely. The invitation arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, folded neatly into Joy's inbox like a challenge disguised as courtesy. A National Women's Leadership Forum, high-profile, televised, carefully curated, wanted Joy Adebamiro as a keynote speaker. Joy stared at the message for a long time. This is the stage people use to rewrite stories, Kunle said carefully when she showed him. It could amplify everything you've built. It could also reduce it to a headline, Joy replied. Olumide listened without interrupting. When Joy finally looked at him, he spoke gently. The question isn't whether they deserve you, he said. It's whether you want to speak. Joy thought of the warehouse, the women practicing skills, counting coins, learning to stand straighter with every small win. She thought of the comments, the video, the way pain tried to resurface when memory was invited back to the table. I don't want to perform strength, she said slowly. I want to speak truth. Then speak it, Olumide replied. On your terms. She accepted. The forum took place in a modern hall overlooking the lagoon, glass walls reflecting sunlight and power. Cameras lined the aisles. Influencers, executives, activists, everyone arrived polished, prepared to be inspired. Joy stood backstage, microphone clipped neatly to her dress. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. 5 minutes, the coordinator said. Joy closed her eyes. She didn't rehearse a speech. She rehearsed a memory. The laughter, the heat, the silence. Then the other memories followed: the warehouse, the women's hands, the quiet applause that came not from praise, but from belonging. When her name was called, Joy walked onto the stage without haste. Applause filled the hall, curious, respectful, expectant. She waited until it faded. My name is Joy Adebamiro, she began. Her voice was calm, unembellished. I was once humiliated in public and told without words that I did not belong. The room stilled. I didn't come here to retell that story, she continued. I came to talk about what happens after the cameras turn away, after the laughter ends, after survival becomes a habit. She paused, letting the silence work. Humiliation teaches you how to disappear, Joy said, but dignity, true dignity, teaches you how to return. She spoke of work, of systems, of women whose talents were buried beneath fear. She did not name her attackers. She did not replay the night. I learned something important, she said. Power doesn't begin when you're seen. It begins when you decide you're worth seeing, even if no one else agrees yet. The audience leaned forward. When we build solutions, we must ask who they serve, Joy continued, and who they silence. Charity without respect is another kind of harm. Opportunity, when designed with humility, becomes restoration. She ended without a call to action, no fundraising link, no dramatic close. I don't need applause, Joy said softly. I need partnership with people willing to listen longer than they speak. The applause that followed was different, slower, deeper. Backstage, the coordinator wiped her eyes. That wasn't a speech, she whispered. That was grounding. The coverage came quickly. Clips circulated. Quotes trended, not the sensational kind, but the kind that lingered. Dignity teaches you how to return. Requests followed panels, interviews, collaborations. Joy accepted selectively. She declined loudly when conditions threatened her values. Then came the message she hadn't expected. From Edouard Balogun. Joy stared at the name, a familiar weight pressing in her chest. She hadn't heard from him since that night outside the mansion. I'm opening a vocational center, the message read. I won't attach my name to it. I won't ask you to endorse it. I just want to know if you'd review the structure quietly. Joy didn't answer immediately. That evening, she walked the warehouse after hours. The hum of the city seeped through the walls. She thought about accountability, not as punishment, but as commitment. She replied the next morning. I'll review it, quietly. Weeks later, the center opened in another part of the city. No fanfare, no speeches. Joy never visited publicly. But systems she'd learned to build quietly echoed there too. Not redemption, responsibility. At the same time, a fracture widened elsewhere. Zainab Balogun's world had continued to shrink. Invitations dried up. The social circles she once ruled moved on without her. Volunteering had given her structure but not belonging. One afternoon, she stood outside Joy's second location, hesitant. She didn't go in. Instead, she left a box at the gate, supplies neatly packed, labeled simply for training. Joy found it later and said nothing, but she noticed the consistency after that. Boxes arrived monthly, no notes, no requests. Change, Joy realized, didn't always announce itself. The program continued to grow carefully. 2 more locations opened. Mentors trained mentors. Women became supervisors. Supervisors became leaders. One evening, Joy sat with Aisha, the woman who had once held her first rent receipt like a fragile miracle. I hired someone today, Aisha said, beaming. I was so nervous. Joy laughed softly. And I remembered what you said, Aisha replied. I asked how she wanted to be treated. Joy felt warmth spread through her chest. Later on the balcony, Olumide joined her. The city shimmered below, familiar and new all at once. You've changed the conversation, he said. Joy shook her head. I've changed the structure, she corrected. The conversation follows. Olumide smiled. Do you ever think about that night now? Joy considered the question carefully. I think about it the way you think about a scar, she said. Not with pain, with memory. She leaned on the railing, breathing in the night. Humiliation tried to define me, Joy continued, but purpose edited the ending. Below them, the city pulsed with life-flawed, resilient, endlessly becoming. And Joy Adebamiro stood not above it, not apart from it, but firmly within it, grounded in a truth she had built herself. By the time the rainy season returned to Lagos, Joy understood something she hadn't before. Impact attracts resistance long after applause fades. It started subtly. A delayed permit, a supplier who suddenly doubled prices, a training partner who withdrew without explanation. None of it was dramatic enough to make headlines, but together it formed a familiar pattern, pressure without fingerprints. Kunle noticed first. Someone is trying to slow you down, he said quietly as they reviewed numbers one evening. Joy nodded. I know. What do you want to do, he asked. Joy leaned back in her chair, eyes thoughtful. We don't fight noise with noise, she said. We strengthen structure. And that was exactly what she did. Joy tightened systems. She diversified suppliers. She trained internal teams to replace external dependencies. Every obstacle became a lesson. Every delay became an opportunity to teach resilience. But pressure doesn't only come from outside. One afternoon, a disagreement broke out among the women. 2 supervisors arguing over authority voices raised old habits creeping back in. The warehouse fell silent as Joy approached. She didn't shout. She didn't choose sides. She asked one question. What are we building here? The women looked at each other, then down. Power. One murmured uncertainly. Joy shook her head gently. Power is what we escaped, she said. We're building responsibility. They sat down together that evening, talking long after work hours ended. Not about blame, but about fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of being invisible again. Joy listened. Then she spoke. This place isn't perfect, she said, and neither are we. But if we repeat the same harm we survived, then we've learned nothing. The next day, both women apologized to each other and to the team. It wasn't smooth, but it was real. That same week, Joy received another unexpected message from a journalist. There are rumors questioning your funding sources, the message read. Would you like to respond? Joy felt a familiar tightening in her chest. Old instincts whispered, defend yourself, explain, prove your worth. She ignored the instinct. Instead, she invited the journalist to visit. No press release, no prepared statement, just transparency. The journalist arrived skeptical and left quiet. The article that followed was not flattering, but it was fair. What stands out is not the money it concluded, but the discipline. This organization does not move fast, it moves deliberately. Joy framed that line and hung it in her office. Across the city, the Balogan mansion had changed in ways no one talked about publicly. Funke Balogan had retreated from social life almost entirely. Invitations went unanswered, her days filled with long silences and too much thinking. For the first time in years, there was no audience to perform for. One afternoon, she visited the vocational center Adewale had opened. She stood at the back unnoticed watching women train. She saw focus, structure, respect. Tears welled in her eyes, not from shame alone, but from recognition. This was what she had protected herself from all those years. Adewale noticed her and approached quietly. You can help, he said simply. Funke nodded. I want to. She started small, donating supplies anonymously, funding a course without attaching her name, sitting through sessions without speaking. It didn't erase the past, but it shifted the future. Zainab's transformation was quieter and harder. Volunteering had stripped her of performance. There were no mirrors in the shelter, no applause, just need. One evening, she overheard two women arguing over food portions. The sound triggered something sharp inside her, an old urge to assert dominance. She caught herself. Instead of intervening with authority, she asked a question awkwardly, uncertainly. What do you think is fair? The women stared at her surprised. Zainab waited. It wasn't leadership yet, but it was restraint. Back at the warehouse, Joy prepared for the most difficult step yet. Succession. I don't want this to depend on me forever, she told Olumide one night as they walked along the waterfront. If I disappear, it should survive. Olumide studied her. That's the mark of real leadership, he said. Building something that doesn't need you at the center. Joy began training others, not just in skills, but in values. She stepped back from daily operations, watching carefully to see what held and what cracked. Some things broke. She let them. One afternoon, Aisha approached her nervous. I made a decision without asking, she said. I hope that was okay. Joy smiled. That's the point, she replied. The warehouse no longer felt like Joy's creation. It felt like a living thing. On the anniversary of the night that changed everything, Joy stood alone on her balcony, the city humming below. She thought about humiliation not as a wound, but as a turning point. Olumide joined her quietly. You don't talk about that night much anymore, he said. Joy nodded. Because it doesn't need my attention, she replied. It already gave me everything it could. What did it give you? He asked. She considered the question carefully. Clarity, Joy said, about who I never want to be. They stood in silence, the kind that no longer felt empty. Below them, Lagos moved chaotic, relentless, alive. Women walked home from work. Buses honked. Dreams collided with reality. Joy placed a hand over her heart, steady and calm. The world had tested her resolve again and again, and each time she had chosen structure over spectacle, responsibility over revenge, growth over bitterness. The morning Joy finally stepped away from the warehouse for an entire week felt strange, almost wrong. For years, her identity had been welded to presence, showing up early, staying late, knowing every name, every problem, every small victory. Letting go felt like stepping off solid ground, yet that was exactly why she had to do it. Joy stood at the entrance watching the women move through their routines without her instruction. Aisha led the briefing calmly. Another supervisor corrected a mistake gently. Laughter broke out near the kitchen, then settled back into focus. The system held. Joy exhaled slowly, a smile touching her lips. Olumide waited by the car. "You ready?" he asked. Joy took one last look at the building that had once been an empty shell, then nodded. "I am." They drove out of Lagos before the traffic thickened, the city giving way to quieter roads, open sky, and a rare sense of distance. Joy watched the horizon unfold and realized how long it had been since she had allowed herself rest without guilt. At the coastal retreat Olumide had arranged, not luxurious, just peaceful, Joy slept deeply the first night. No dreams, no echoes of laughter, just stillness. On the second day she woke early and walked along the shore alone. The tide rolled in steadily, indifferent to status, pain, or praise. Joy let her feet sink into the wet sand, grounding herself in the moment. She thought about the girl she had been, the one who learned to be quiet to survive, the one who apologized for taking up space, the one who believed endurance was the same as worth. That girl had carried her this far, but she no longer needed to lead. When Joy returned, Olumide was sitting on the porch reading. He looked up and smiled. "You look lighter," he said. "I feel honest," Joy replied. That afternoon a message arrived from the warehouse. Not a problem, not a crisis, a photo. Women gathered around a table celebrating the graduation of a new group. At the center was a handwritten sign, "We belong." Joy stared at the image for a long time, her chest tightening with emotion. "They don't need me the way they used to," she said quietly. Olumide shook his head. "They need you differently now," he said, as proof that dignity can survive. When Joy returned to Lagos days later, the city welcomed her without ceremony. No headlines, no calls demanding comment. Life had moved on, and that she realized was its greatest compliment. At the warehouse, the women greeted her warmly, then went back to work. No reverence, no dependence, just respect. Aisha pulled her aside. "We've been offered a partnership," she said. "We want your thoughts, but we'll decide as a team." Joy smiled. "That's exactly right." Later that evening, Joy visited Mama Maid. The old woman sat outside her home sorting vegetables, humming softly. She looked up as Joy approached and smiled as if she had been expecting her. "You look like a woman who knows where she stands," Mama Maid said. Joy sat beside her. "I learned that standing doesn't always mean being visible," she replied. "Sometimes it means being rooted." Mama Maid nodded approvingly. "That lesson takes a lifetime." As dusk settled, Joy reflected on everything that had changed and everything that hadn't. Cruelty still existed. Inequality still lingered. The world had not suddenly become kind. But Joy had learned something more powerful than fairness: agency. Weeks later, Joy received one final message that surprised her, from Tunde Ajayi. It was brief, awkward, unpolished. "I lost everything that night. At first I blamed you. Now I see I was exposed, not attacked. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better." Joy read it once. Then she deleted it, not out of anger, but out of closure. She did not owe everyone her attention. One evening, Joy and Olumide attended a small gathering, not a gala, not a forum, just a quiet dinner with people who had walked similar roads. No speeches were made, no stories exaggerated. As the night wound down, someone asked Joy a simple question. "If you could speak to the woman you were that night standing in the middle of the room, what would you say?" Joy didn't answer immediately. She pictured herself again under the lights, the laughter, the heat. Then she spoke. "I would tell her this," Joy said softly. "You are not broken. You are becoming." The table fell silent, not from discomfort, but from recognition. Later, alone on her balcony, Joy watched Lagos breathe beneath her. The same city that had once swallowed her now felt like a place she could move through freely, without shrinking, without armor. Olumide joined her, leaning on the railing. "You changed the meaning of that night," he said. Joy shook her head gently. "No," she replied. "That night changed me. I chose what to do with it." She rested her hands over her heart, steady and sure. Humiliation had tried to write her ending, but Joy Adebamiro chose to write something else. Not revenge, not spectacle, not power over others, but dignity that multiplied, and that she knew was the kind of wealth that never landed with a jet but stayed long after the noise faded. Joy. Adebamiro's journey reminds us that humiliation does not define a person, how they respond to it does. Life will sometimes place us in rooms where we are laughed at, overlooked, or reduced to labels that have nothing to do with our true worth. In those moments, it's easy to believe that silence means weakness and that survival requires shrinking ourselves. But Joy's story shows another truth: endurance can become strength when it is guided by purpose. True dignity is not proven by wealth, applause, or sudden recognition. It is proven by how we treat others when we finally have a choice. Joy did not use her moment to seek revenge or shame those who hurt her. Instead, she chose responsibility over resentment, structure over spectacle, and growth over bitterness. She transformed pain into opportunity, not just for herself, but for others who had been taught to feel invisible. Her story teaches us that kindness is not softness, and humility is not weakness. Sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is to build something better and invite others to stand with you. When you choose dignity, you don't just heal, you multiply hope. Now we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment that tried to break you but ended up shaping who you became? What lesson from Joy's story touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who needs it today. And if you enjoy emotional stories about resilience, human values, and second chances, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. More powerful stories are coming, stories that remind us we are more than what the world tries to reduce us to.